Hello, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Resident Evil 3 remake. I've wanted to do a video on this as I did one on the second game, so I figured doing one on the remake would be just as understandable as that would be. This game is nearly 5 years old by the time this video is out, but I figure reviewing it could be like a good retrospect to this game, so without further ado, let's get into this. The visuals look pretty good. I don't really have any problem with them, and the overall game runs pretty well as it is. Apart from a few enemies stuttering a bit, I don't think it performs badly. And either way, I mean, it looks pretty good. So there's that. Graphics are fine. They've aged as well as they could have. Looks good. Not a whole lot of problems here, visually at least. Resident Evil 3's gameplay is pretty much the same exact as Resident Evil 2 Remake's gameplay. It's basically Resident Evil 7's gameplay, which was a first person shooter, but turned into a third person shooter. You're not going to really see much of a difference between the two. The only difference is that in this game, you can have certain abilities between each characters. Like Jill, she can like dodge and evade enemies, and Carlos can punch people, obviously. So yeah, it's really the same gameplay. There's not much of a difference apart from a few mechanics. You have the same inventory system. You have a lot of what Resident Evil 2 did, so it's just kind of like familiar notes. Not a whole lot of change here, other than a few things, maybe. Resident Evil 3 is a survival horror game, so as you can expect, most of your levels are going to deal with the zombies around you. Also, whatever other infected thing could chase you down too. That too. A lot of them are level based, and the enemies have a decent amount of variety depending on where you go, and that kind of changes how they are throughout the game. Like, for example, you have, like, in the sewers, you have the reptile things that try to hunt you down, and you have to like blow them up with a grenade or bomb gun, whatever you could do. That's probably the easiest. And then you have in the lab, you have the mutated zombies, which could basically kill you instantly unless you have 20 shotgun shells on you. But again, the best thing to fight them with is with a grenade launcher or acid rounds. That's probably the best you could do to fight enemies like that. And obviously, Nemesis could be taken down with 2 shotgun shells to the chest, as the shotgun is more powerful than the pistol. Um, he kind of chases you throughout every level, so it kind of adds like a sort of, oh my god, I'm running from Nemesis, but I have to find this resource across the map, so it gets you to save a lot, which theoretically that's fine. Resident Evil 2 did a lot of that too, but there is a problem with some of the boss fights you have in this game, as this game kind of just throws them at you, and I don't like how they do the Nemesis fights in this game, at least most of the Nemesis fights, because the first one, all you have to do is go around the map, find resources to get him down, but you don't know how you're going to be able to do that because you just have to shoot as much explosive rounds at him, I guess. It is scripted, but it does make it kind of hard to give yourself a sense of strategy in this game. And then the second fight, you have to like set him on fire. That's probably the easiest way to get him to run on top of the building so he can run in a circle and then stop, so then you can shoot him off of there. And then that weakens him. But you have to do that twice in this game because the third boss fight is basically that, except we're in an electric room. So there's not a whole lot of variety in the boss fights with Nemesis in this game. The last one, I guess you just shoot a laser at him and then he's dead, but I don't know. There's not a lot of variety to the boss fights. And the levels do kind of get a little bit repetitive here and there. I feel like the story in this game is kind of weird and also very short, as this game is like 6 hours long. The story has us play as Jill Valentine, who is attacked in her apartment by a giant mutated creature and has to save an entire city from a massive apocalypse, as this mutated creature has not just existed in the city, but also the entire city has been mutated, most likely by him, as a lab breakout happened, and you have to stop it. Throughout the way, you meet Carlos, who you play as for like an hour or two of the game, and then you go back and play as Jill, where you finish off Nemesis at the very end of the game, and then in the ending sequence, have to save Carlos, which you do, and that's the ending. This story was kind of weird to describe, but yeah, that's the story. It's pretty lukewarm at best, in my opinion, and honestly, we don't really get enough time with Carlos for anything really to matter, as we're already trying to find Nemesis. So yeah, and it could just be the fact that the game is only 6 hours long and maybe its short length just didn't work for a story like this. In conclusion, I don't think Resident Evil 3 is a disaster. It's just not as good as Resident Evil 2 was, and I kind of blame that on its short length, because if this game was a lot longer, I think it would have been probably as good, or at least close to as good as Resident Evil 2 was, as it pretty much has the same concept and gameplay there. It's just, I don't know, not as good as Resident Evil 2 was, and in many ways, I kind of see it as a bit of lost potential, with a lot of its anticlimactic fights and stuff like that. It just didn't have as much of the suspense as Resident Evil 2, the remake, did. But Resident Evil 7 will always be my favorite Resident Evil game of all time. So there's that. Overall, I would probably give this game like a 5 out of 10. Peace and goodbye.